Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another rendition of Unsheathed. Today, I am bringing on essentially an alien. I have my buddy George here, who's going to start talking momentarily. I met him through the social medias, and I've been following him for a while, have had some conversations. We've been more involved with one another through Pivavate, and George is a conduit of information and has a dangerously contagious smile and laugh. And that's the primary reason why I brought him on. So, George, go ahead and introduce yourself. You're up.
Thank you, Taylor. Appreciate it, man. I'm so used to being on a podcast, so not actually having someone watch me speak on a digital screen per se. First off, thank you for bringing me on. I appreciate it. Our connection is a very cute and beautiful one, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
As many people say, you connect onto social media with individuals and you never really end up becoming real friends with those people that you end up following. It's kind of just a quick snapshot into their life. And as I've gotten older, I'm 33 now. As I've gotten older, I've that social media platform, I call it my MySpace page.
Yep.
Because realistically, if you go and look at it, I haven't deleted my Instagram since I got it back in 2011. So I've had my Instagram up for 11 years now, and you could sit there if you wanted to. Again, it's creepy, but you could sit there and scroll all the way back to the very first post. I think it was of like some paintings, some food, and a couple of dog pics, and me maybe working as a reconnaissance Marine in the Marine Corps, as an instructor at the Basic Reconnaissance Schoolhouse at that time period, where social media wasn't around prior to that. So to look at it now and see how much it's grown, I've utilized it for just personal use, for business, for growth, for synthesizing information, so I can better learn and then share it with others. That's what that's been. And as time has gone on, as I've kind of gone through like my human development phases of life and into this new realm of, I guess you can say adulthood or middle adulthood, however you want to look at it, I still feel like a little kid at heart. My body still moves like a little kid. I try and keep it there. I try not to like have aches and pains as much. And whenever I do, I become the biggest baby ever because I thought I was doing all the right things possible. So meeting everybody where they're at, hey, just because you think you're good at something, you can still fall back. And that has been a big piece for me as a whole when it comes to working with individuals like yourself, when we meet each other through social media platforms and nonprofit organizations like PB Abante. And then from there, it's like, well, hey man, we're doing the same things, just utilizing a different language. But when we do come and sit down and talk with each other, we can develop the same color cups and have that conversation to help drive information and emotional connection and the idea behind your process and what inside your heart, right? And whenever I share your things, it's because it comes from the heart. And I don't share a lot of things on my social media because in the past I used to do that. I used to be a sponsored athlete trying to promote all that bullshit, and it's just not who I am. It doesn't feel genuine anymore. So now it's like I post things that are from the heart and genuine and I feel comfortable with. Again, it's my MySpace page, right? Like and we go think about MySpace back in 2004, 2005. What did you used to throw up on there? Remember the cool fucking music you had on the back end? You had you learned how to code pretty much to go ahead and set up this wall for again, the internet to see you. And you just shared everything. I was some punk hardcore kid living in San Antonio, Texas that time period, throwing roundhouse kicks and hardcore dancing to Bane, Sudden Death, Folsom, going to the opposite route of acoustic music and listening to Ace Enders of the early November, Chris Cabrera of the Dashboard Confessionals, this very strange individual, which we call me an alien, who's has a ton of information. How it happened, I don't know. And I think it's just, I have to thank my mom and my parents for not putting me into a bubble, right? Not being hey, look, you're this crazy off the wall, dynamic thought process individual. She saw and recognized me as a kid and was I just can't stop this. And has allowed me to be the human I am today. Yeah. Have I been through hardships? Have I learned a fuck ton of lessons from trial and error? Yes. But ultimately, we go back and look at it. And, you talk about this all the time. What is the root start of all of this, right? The root cause doesn't have to be bad. You know, what was like the influential nutrients that made you become who you are? And I think a lot of people miss that. So, you know, when we go and look at social media now and bringing it full circle back to that piece in the intro, the idea behind it is, no, man, like you and I are able to connect on another level. Yeah. Have we met in person yet? No, but we've had conversations about being a father. We've had conversations about how to run a business, how to start a business, what you should stick to. And yeah, it sucks right now because you're doing these things, but guess what? In long term, it's going to pay off. Back and forth, sharing writings with each other. You're one of my, I'm not going to say, we don't call it beta reader, but you're one of the dudes that like helps fuel my energy of being like honest with everything, but at the same time, giving me some grace and being like, dude, keep doing it. It's a mutual respect back and forth. And it's really cool to be able to sit here and say that like social media has been able to do that. When the world today, we see influencers and those who think they're influencing, and we see, you know, and nothing against those guys, like do your thing. I'm not going to shit on it. Do it. Or even all the individuals as veterans who are like gun ho about sharing war stories and talking about war and studying it. Fucking do it, dude. Right? Because guess what? I'm going to dip into that one of these days. I'm going to dip into that the other day. I'm going to dip into that the other day. I'm going to dip into the other thing the other day. And that's true. If you look at my social media, I talk about everything I do in my life, from photography to writing to strength and conditioning, my profession, my personal life. Why? Because again, at the end of the day, how do we build a real connection in this world with social media and this phone that we carry 24/7? How do we develop a new connection that's ultimately going to make sure that when I meet you in person, that it's like we've known each other for 10 years? You know, so that's not everybody that we talk to on social media, but there is a small majority of individuals. When you say you keep that circle close, some of those individuals in my circle have been from social media, right? And it's a powerful thing, dude.
Yeah, no, social media is such an amazing conduit for connection. And when you do have that close circle, that level of love, like you were talking about, comes with accountability, making sure that we're all keeping everything checked. So, as much as I personally enjoy talking to you, even through text message alone, it's very fulfilling. Prior to me wanting to hear more about today, who is younger GB3?
And younger GB3, let's go ahead and just start off as a 8-year-old kid who's watched his mom and dad divorce and now has become the man of the house to help support mom, right? But mom ultimately is supporting GB3 and all of that. You know, coming from that and moving through my adolescence into the military, because that's where, you know, I led myself to from my adolescence through middle school and high school. It, again, it was one of those things that I was able to really develop a sense of who I was early on as a kid. And that was through, you know, hardships and lessons. You know, a 14, 15, 16, 13-year-old kid shouldn't experience realistically, right?
Yeah.
And I shared about it a little bit, you know, but it's more of the idea of like, it only hardened me and helped lay down a foundation for what was to come, is ultimately how I look at that. And I'm not saying war, I'm not saying like the negative impacts. No, what I'm saying is like the brotherhood, the accountability, the discipline that I was going to need to survive in a gun club that ultimately helped shape me, right? Like the gun club, the Marine Corps, my service, it was the chisel with a small hammer that helped start, you know, putting out details of who I was going to be, no matter if I stayed in or if I got out or if I got killed in war. It didn't matter. It was just the fact that this beautiful outcome. And it's taken a long time for me to actually view this from this headspace, right? Because again, a lot of people will automatically put this filter up and create this lens to the world in front of them, walking away from something that they truly love. That, you know, I get it. I understand. I don't call my blouse. It was my jersey. It had my name on it. It had my fucking team that I played for on. Right? Dudes before me had bled in it, had fucking done everything in it. And it was just one of those things where it was like, all right, cool. This is what this is setting me up for. I can look at it now from that perspective and share those two connections and transition them two together, which allow for us to look at, yeah, did I go to a war a couple of times? Did I see some combat? 100%, right? But that's not what that's about. Like I'm thankful that I made it back alive, because I know a lot of brothers didn't. And I know a lot of brothers who have taken their life by their own hands that taught them how to destroy the enemy, which ended up slowly turning on them over time.
Yeah.
Now, during my time in service, you don't think about, I didn't think about those things, right? Like, what was the impacts of this afterwards? It was the fact that I was able to jump out of airplanes. I was able to do some really fucking cool things with some high level dudes and high performing dudes. And it took me a very long time to realize, like, oh, fuck no, I'm an F1 race car as well. And I'm lining up on the Indy 500, and I've eaten properly. I've done all the right things to get me here, to put me in this position, which not many people, are willing to self-endorse that for themselves. And like, when I had to like step back and go from that, static line distance of a jump viewpoint, that 1,300 foot view, all the way up to that hey-ho or halo jump at 13,000, all the way up to 30,000 possibly, it gives you a greater perspective on the area of operation of what's happened within your life. And the only reason I've been able to like recognize these things is because of the ability to start learning how to storytell. Learning to be like, okay, cool, here's this keyboard. Oh, sweet, here's the coffee that I drink that tastes beautifully, and it was roasted in a high level organic place that, helps make it taste a certain way. Oh, I have the computer I'm talking to. I start looking around, my dog's in my room. I start breathing everything in and being like, how does all of this impact me? Not just from a negative, but also from a positive as well as a neutral. Because again, ultimately, that's how we view the world, in a positive, neutral, and negative way. And I'm going to take this approach from the strength conditioning world. When I go ahead and take an individual who wants to be a functioning individual in terms of being able to move for long distances, but be really strong. That's something you don't hear all the time nowadays, because it's either one or the other. But if you go back and look into literature and our history of a human species, we've always been able to be strong and move for long distances. But why? So ultimately, it comes down to being like, well, how do I go ahead and bring myself to this huge viewpoint in my area of operation that I work in, right? I grew up over here. I've been in the military. I've been in the strength conditioning world, right? I'm learning how to write and storytell. I'm like creating my own world within my own area of operation that I want, instead of letting somebody else develop my world that ends up happening. And that's what I'm getting to when I bring it back to my time in the service, and my time coming up to this point of where I'm at today has been a lot of trial and error, having to sit with myself in isolation to go ahead and think about things, put myself into places of pain. And again, not from a negative headspace now, maybe then, but now it's like, oh, wow, my time in service was fucking awesome. I had a blast. I got to do some really cool things that not many Marines get to do. And when I joined the Marine Corps, I didn't even think I was going to go ahead and be what I was. I was this drug addict kid who couldn't pass the ASVAB. Took him 3 times to pass the ASVAB. 27, 28, and a 31. And the reason why it took me so long is I couldn't stop doing drugs. I couldn't stop putting cocaine into my nose. But ultimately, like, I was put into that world for a reason, which ultimately set me up for success going into the Marine Corps. It was like my preseason to the military. But when I got into the military, it broke me of all those bad habits and taught me new habits, ones that were skills to survive in a world that was ultimately trying to kill me when you got put on deployments. And I get, like, not everyone has experienced that kind of intensity or volume of war. And I get that. And I'm not saying one or the other, because I know guys who have been to war multiple times, right? It's not the fact of like how many wars you've been to or the one war you went to. It's the fact of what did you take from that as a human being, and how are you applying those lessons to life today? Again, you would have asked me 10 years ago, or the Olympic years, every 4 years, if you would have asked me 4 years ago, could I have had this conversation with you? Or 4 years before that? Probably not. So again, when I can go back and pull myself out to that 30,000 foot view, preparing for a halo jump or a hey-ho jump, however you want to look at it, it's given me the ability to recreate and rebuild my own world. Right. And that was what my service did for me, or my service did for me, was it taught me to look at life in a very different way. It always was there. I just had to be able to take the lens out in front of me that was clouded and jaded by the lasting seconds or situations or experiences I had with higher ups or individuals of telling me that I was not going to make it in the real world. Hey, well, guess what? Fuck you. Because you know what? I am making it. I'm alive. I'm breathing. And I'm stuffing my happiness down into the throat of those who never believed in me. So again, it's this like happy balance of like carrying, your heart in front of you, but also protecting it. Right? Like that's one thing that I really truly believe, like that's the warrior path, is being able to control the two, the dark passenger who's to the left of me, and then the happy dude who navigates life and crushes it to the right of me. But guess what? Both of them work together. And the military and the Marine Corps taught me how to view the two and use them in a world that I needed to survive in. Yeah, did they teach me how to transition out and use them together in this real world? No. Was it their job? No. Let that fucking go, guys. Let it go. And ladies, let it go. That's not their fucking job. That was a profession that you did just as much as if you would have gone to college and got a business degree and went and started a business, or if you would have gone and worked in the fire department for 8 years and walking out of it. It wasn't their job. Their job was to teach you to be an asset to those to the left and right of you. Now let's carry that sentence out into the real world now, post-service. You still need to be an asset to those to the left and right of you in this world now. And I don't think we view it from that perspective. I think we end up forgetting that when we take that jersey off, just because that jersey was an external object on top of you, you wore it for a quite significant time period, right? No matter what service, no matter LEO, firefighter, whatever, you wore it for a certain time period, you gave yourself to it. So guess what it does to you? It then wraps itself around your soul and spirit and becomes part of you. And another hat I can take off and put on the wall of identities. And whenever I need to go pull one off of it, I can put it on. Yep. But understanding that no one is better. That's ultimately what it comes down to for me, at least in this position now, being out of the Marine Corps since 2000, back into 2014, December. I've been out now going on 6-7 years, and it's taken me this long just to be here. But you know what it is just like everything else. There's a half-life to something. When you give yourself to something, understand there's gonna be a half-life of consequences that you have to learn to work through.
All about perspective.
Yeah.
That's why I love the photography metaphor, changing out the lens. That chimes with me so well.
Yeah.
How long were you in the service?
So I joined June of 2007 and I left December of 2014. So right before 2015. And realistically, I didn't talk about this much because I felt like a fucking quitter. I ended up doing early out because of the way the Marine Corps was moving. And I didn't like it. And it's something that I've always done. That's just who I am. My mom makes fun of me. She's like, you change your underwear more than anyone I know. And it's just the Mexican metaphor of like you can never just stick to one thing for a very long time. It's not a bad thing. I commit and I stick to it and I finish out my stuff. But once I see that it's not something I enjoy anymore, or it's making me happy, I am going to go ahead and put my foot in. And realistically, I ended up getting out 6 months early from my eight-year full mark. But for the longest time, I looked at it as guilt and like shame and like a quitter. But ultimately, I looked at it as like, no, man, like what was I doing with that as well? So as an instructor, the basic reconnaissance course from 2011 of February, all the way through till I left, I was an instructor at the schoolhouse, training Marines to become recon Marines. And I was with a cadre of individuals who just got back from war, where we did a massive amount of work. We were out there with the 3.5 guys. We were out there with the 3.6 guys. We were out there with the 1.6 all in 2010, where a bunch of us came back of just, I guess you can say, just fueled with hate. And I had to learn how to channel all of that as an instructor training these guys now. And what it ended up doing was it opened the door to the strength conditioning world. So what did I end up doing is I ended up creating my own coaching company in 2012 while still in, because I was working with all of these individuals who I'm putting through swim assessments, swimming things, running, rucking, workouts, teaching them the job from the skills. I was doing all of those things with all these other individuals that were to the left and right of me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was one of those things where it's like, no, you know what? I had national level, like I had my first national level weightlifter in 2013, bro. He was a youth kid, my first youth national level weightlifter in the 62 at the time period weight class. Took second at nationals for him, and started building my athletes. By the time 2014-15 came around, dude, I was looking at opening my own gym. I was already getting ready to go into an internship for strength conditioning. I was working with multiple different athletes. I was already traveling to competitions, and I was already like working in the higher level with functional fitness athletes, CrossFit, weightlifting, and tactical professionals. I was doing those things.
So and this is curiosity based and partially touching on like transition. With you still essentially working at the schoolhouse, building this business, how did you come up with the decision of wanting to take your skills for when you got out of the service while you were still in the service? Like, what motivated the initial shame that you mentioned that turned into actual just growth and respecting your boundaries? How did you come up with that while you were there and start having that desire to pretty much start your transition plan years ahead?
My kids.
Okay.
So I have four kids. I have 3 daughters and 1 son now at the age of 33. I've been a parent now I've been going on for about 10 years now, being a parent or being a dad. And early on, when I got back from Afghanistan and I became an instructor, I ended up having my first daughter at like 2012 with another Marine. And again, your normal story, we're not unique. It was just fun and games, and look what happened. Well, we decided to raise a beautiful daughter who is 9 years old now, and doing anything was my first actual learning how to love and like a purpose to live. And like, all right, I can't keep doing this job, especially if it's going to be the intensity in which I just experienced.
Yeah,
that's really was my thought process. Like, all right, cool. But I also viewed myself in that position as an instructor, again, because of the giant shoulders that I stood on being raised in the community over at 1st Recon Battalion. I knew that I couldn't be a liability to these guys that I'm training and teaching to get ready to go do the exact same thing I just got done doing. Meaning that I wanted to train them to be better than the guys to the left and right of me and I. Mm-hmm. That was my goal. So as time started moving forward, I ended up having another kid. And this time it was like getting ready to transition out of being an instructor, and I was getting ready to go back to the fleet, right? The operational world. And I had gotten word that I was gonna be heading over to Force Company, and I wasn't sure if like I was ready to go ahead and do another pump with now having 2 kids. And again, I wasn't completely healthy, dude. I have 4 kids from 3 different women. 2 of them are from my wife now, and the other 2 are from 2 different ladies. And they're the greatest mothers in the world. I respect them like no other. And, they support me in all the things that I do and share. And I know that someday my kids will see this and read it or listen to it and be like, holy fuck, my 9-year-old already, dude. She's like, Dad, I typed your name in on Google and I saw a bunch of podcasts in your Instagram page and and I'm like, and now I have a conversation with her. When I write things, I share it with her.
I love that.
I love that. Like at 9 years old, and again, times are a little bit different now, but like, I was like, that's another way I can connect with her. It's like, here, baby, read these. And then she writes her own stuff, and she loves fantasy, and she loves reading. She loves photography. She just wants to be like Dad. And you're just like, man. So yeah, asking your question, like what ultimately helped me make that decision was when I first found out my second daughter was going to be born. And like, I
Okay.
sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, dude, I was like, man, maybe I should have stayed in to like, give my kids more. But then I was like, wait a minute. I was able to give my kids more, not from a financial standpoint, because that took a little bit for me to get back on my feet, but
Yep.
it allowed me to like focus on time as much as I could to like focus on me so that I could be a better father at that time period. That was what ultimately it came down to. I didn't think about nothing else. I wasn't thinking about my strength and conditioning career. It wasn't nothing. It was more of just like all these things I have in front of me, I have to do to support my kids and to show them what a real dad is. Because again, everyone has their daddy stories and has their mommy stories and all the other things. I'm not talking shit on it, please. I mean that from my heart. It's the fact that like I have to take accountability at some point and being like, I respect that my father died at the right before I deployed to my last deployment. 2010, he passed away, died in my hands, watched him go through cardiac arrest, but he had been dissolving for some time now. So we saw it coming, but it was like, no, man, like I want to be here for my kids. I want to be able to like walk my daughters down the aisle. I want to be there when my son actually gets married for the first time. Why? Because I didn't have my dad there for any of those things.
Yeah.
Again, you would ask me this question in 2014, I probably wouldn't have been able to answer it in this way. But as I've like sat in silence, in the darkness, by myself, with my eyes closed, traveling my own headspace to like reconnect some of these neurotransmitters that have been stuck for so long that allow to open the door to memories that ultimately make me happy. That is why I ended up leaving the Marine Corps, was because of my family. And I'll always put my family first. And it's even till this day, right? I told my, like, we're getting ready to move out to Tennessee here shortly. Why? Because my wife is going to be happy out there. She's going to be by family and she's going to be with my kid. My kids are going to have family to grow up and we're going to be in a healthy environment. I'm not saying that's not here, but that's what she wants and that's what she needs. So guess what? Cool, babe. I'm going to go ahead and start making the things happen. I need your help, but let's make it happen and we'll get out there, So ultimately that transition, and I know I've been talking a lot about a lot of things, but that's just kind of the way my life is, right?
Mhm.
Like these are like things that I'm working with. So when I go ahead and look at that transition, I've let go of that shame and guilt and been like, no, I did this for my family. I did this for myself, because look where I'm at today, dude. I still run
Yep.
GB3 athletics. I've been running it for almost a decade now, working with thousands of athletes. I'm getting my degree in sports psychology that I've been working on for almost 6 years now, but that's just what life is about. I'm working for Softly, where I've been with them now since we first started Instagram page and Facebook page in 2015, right? Like, I'm getting ready to, potentially, and I hate sharing too much of this because I believe in energy, keeping it secret, but I'm potentially going to be an author at the end of the year. Like that's mind blowing. And it's like, but ultimately it's all because I want to be the best father possible.
Yep. Amen to that. Amen to that.
Right? Like that is the greatest part about this. So, I've had to look at my service, my post service, or my transition as like, no, these things were actually an unconscious action that was leading me to a very conscious world.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, dude, it's just, for me, I get sometimes lost for words. And I think it happens more times than not. And most people probably be laughing, like, wait a minute, George has a loss for words. And if we're talking about some things that are like, a nice little tiny like brother punch to the shoulder type feel, you're like, oh God, like it's a fun one. It's like, oh, that's some brother love. It's what does take the breath out of me and the words out of my head and just allows me just to sit there and feel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you get out of the service, 2 kids, a company. Can you recap from DD 214 to today?
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's another wild story, or at least a path. Because I don't want to say that we have books in our life. I think we have chapters in our life. I hear everyone's like, oh, I'm going to put that book away. And I'm like, man, Like, no, dude, like, you know, what I've learned with this whole writing process is, God damn, I edit and re-edit and re-edit so many times. But what does it do for me? It allows for me to like pay attention to the smallest detail possible. So when I go ahead and look at like my time from DD 214 and when I signed it, dude, yeah, my personal life might have not been the greatest and the healthiest, but whose is when they're transitioning out of the military, getting back from war, um, you know, doing something, you know, doing the amount of work and volume and intensity that I was at, like, yeah, it's going to be a difficult transition. And again, at that time period, there wasn't individuals like us and others out there talking about, hey, let's go and talk about these things and let's fix this. No, bro, you're literally like this, bro. Once you jumped out of that fucking that off spray or whatever you're jumping out of, it was like you're on your own, bro. Like you better know when to pull, you better know your emergency
Yeah.
procedures. You know, you better and but again, at that time period, there was no roadmap, there was no guidebook, there was no GB3 or you know, or Tyler, there was none of that stuff, or any of these individuals that we talk with sharing this stuff. There was none of that. So it was kind of one of those things where it's like, you know, all right, cool. I'm just going to go ahead, just like on a patrol in Afghanistan. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I'm going to go ahead and take that step forward and then take another step forward. And I'm going to go ahead and take what's in front of me and just move forward and handle that as a whole to where I'm in control. And I think that's like the biggest part.
The proverbial cornfield that I've mentioned. Walking into the unknown. Yeah.
Correct. Because ultimately, like, I was just like, all right, cool. Well, I got my business now. GB3 Athletics is running strong. I had just got a phone call from the owner of Softfleet right as I was getting out. It was like, hey, man, getting ready to start this company. Do you want to be a part of it? I know you're getting ready to start a gym. I know you're getting ready to go through an internship. I know you're doing all these things. I want you to be the West Coast vetted coach for Softfleet. I was the very first coach for Softfleet, and I've been with them since then, 7 years now. When it was just a punk kid getting out of fucking the military, and I'm still a punk kid. I like to say that it's part of myself. It's part of my soul. I'm a little punk kid, you know, but you need it. Who couldn't speak properly, couldn't write, very illiterate. And I've had multiple people tell me that to this day, and it's like a mind blowing. I'm like, why didn't anybody ever tell me that? Why didn't anybody ever tell me of how illiterate I was, or how I couldn't even get a fucking sentence across without it making sense? And sometimes I still go there to this day. But you know what I do? Grab it up, hug it, try and fix it, and send it back out. So, you know, he was like, hey, this is what you're going to do. Just help write blogs, help write, you know, some programs. We're just going to be sharing things online. We're going to try and become, you know, that less time capacity of, you know, 2 to 3 hours of work that we're seeing under SEAL Fit, Military Athlete, all these other like companies that were coming around that time period during the big boom of CrossFit. So he was like, I want to shoot more 90 minutes, dude. I want to go ahead and give them boom, boom, boom. Well, I had already kind of been doing that. I had created my own website called combatathlete.com on a WordPress fucking website that I had people following. You know, it was really cool. So like that was cool. And at the same time, I was in the position of moving into like running a gym and the internships that I was going through, to where like I was having the ability to share all this stuff. You know, within 6 months of being out of the military, I had my own gym, bro, called CrossFit Double Barrel, who the owner, the co-owner at the time period, we were co-owners at the time period, is my brother-in-law today. Right. Awesome. And how that became about was that like he was a fucking crew chief on a mission that I distinctively remember of a crew chief hanging out the back of a loading ramp with a 50 cal as they're getting fucking rounds shot at them in Afghanistan and just like lay down waste. And it's like, it always stuck in my head because I was the one running across this open danger area, rounds popping up in front of me with a pistol or with my M4 in my pocket, laying down rounds. And I was like, that's fucking cool. Right? Like in that moment of being shot at, potentially killed, I see this fucking 240-pound dude as a crew chief, just hanging out the back of the bird, bro, laying down waste on a 50 cal, just like, burr, 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 burr. And you're just like, fuck yeah, like that's America. we ended up like sitting there lifting weights. I ended up started coaching him in weightlifting. I took him to the American Open where he competed in his, like, the only reason why we were to connect that was because I started sharing that story with him. Because at that time period, that's all I knew was like, well, let's start sharing stories with each other. He had seen a bunch of combat. I had seen a bunch of combat. We're lifting a bunch of fucking weights, snatching, clean and jerking, trying to fucking just make a living.
Yeah.
He had just transitioned out. So like we kind of came together and was like, make it. Now the steps forward in the gym, great. I mean, the culture, the growth there was amazing. But again, I'm now a single father of 2 kids, seeing them, or you call it a part-time dad, however you want to look at it. I don't care what the label is. It's just that whenever I'm with my kids, I give them all of me. Yep. And even, I've fought to have, legit contracts and lawyer stuff and all those things so that I keep my rights to have my time with my kids because it matters. And that's always been something for me. So I keep going back to that. But when I started doing that, I had the gym, Softly was now running. We were getting ready to put our own app out. They were coming down to my gym, doing videoing stuff. I was putting out educational pieces. I had 2 full-time coaches on salary. The gym opened up in 2015 with 80 plus members off the bat because another gym closed, but I was already coaching in the area. So I built my name. Dude, in 2017 in the summer, it was kind of one of those times where me and my brother-in-law at the time period was like, yeah, man, this isn't working out together as partners. We're going to go our separate ways. He bought me out. And ultimately I walked away, and not in the greatest way possible. As we both can sit here now and agree, like we probably could have done this a little bit more efficient than what we did. But it opened the door because it gave me a full-time position for Softly, to where in 2017 in the summer, I called my boss and my homie, like the guys, and I was like, hey guys, this is what's going on. I'm in a boat right now. I'm just getting done with another internship. I put a resume in with them. I know I'm with you guys. And again, it wasn't because I had any contracts signed. Again, I was just a contractor. I was just helping out because the company wasn't super big yet. And I was like, hey, look, possibly I might be getting picked up with this company in the East Coast, but I wanted to give you guys a heads up and let you know what's going on. A day later, I get a call from the main boss, which is Fish, and a really close friend of mine, still to this day. He goes, what if I told you to come on full time with us? I want you to go ahead and run the whole human performance side of the house, start writing programs, start doing, realistically, let's start pumping programs out for the tactical athletes and for the general pop to follow our stuff so we can get our app grown. I've written over 100 cycles of programs for Softly that we were talking about the other day. I've written a fuck ton of training programs. I've written a fuck ton. I've coached a fuck ton of athletes. I've worked with an array of athletes that you'd be like, wait a minute, you worked with a 60-year-old woman to help her relieve like pre-breast cancer to help her get out of her surgery faster. Yeah. Oh, I've also worked with, someone who's taken second at Best Ranger in a competition. Oh, I've also taken an older lady to run 100 miles. She's completed 500 miles or 400 miles underneath me now. Oh, wow. I've taken a weightlifter who is a mom at home and hangs out and enjoys her time period to like have her change her viewpoint on what weightlifting is as a mother. Right? Like, again, all of these things. And what ended up happening was I was very drawn to the psychology of the human as a whole. Like, how did the brain work? Why do we do these things? Especially when I left Double Barrel, when I sold it, because I was just engulfed coaching and working from 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning, all the way till 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. And then learning and writing programs and doing everything else until 11, 12 at night and doing it all over again. Right? Like, I wasn't very healthy. It was fucked up, still from the military, all those things. So when I bring it full circle, like, that transition kept going. I ended up going full-time with Softly, dude. I got into ultra endurance. I'd already competed at like a higher level in CrossFit at that time, at like big local national events that they would consider at that time period. I was already a weightlifter. I had snatched like 130 kilos, clean and jerked 157 kilograms. So 290 pound snatch and 150 or 353 clean and jerk, I believe. At like my heaviest I was 205 pounds at that time period. And then I transitioned after I sold the gym into ultra endurance. So like, I've always believed, like, don't ever be a studio gangster. So like, if you're going to say you're going to do something, do it. And if you're going to work with someone, you're going to go ahead and have the experience to work with them. Right? Like, that is the biggest thing. And I've learned that from the reconnaissance community, right? Like, you don't just say you do the things, you do the thing. And I was like, well, cool. I'm going to get into understanding ultra endurance. Why? Because my boss was like, hey, we're going to go hire someone else to help with the endurance piece of Softly and do these things, how to take an athlete from being super strong. And I was like, well, why wouldn't she just use me? So it was kind of like a chip on my shoulder and being like, well, watch this. And dude, it was a fucking beautiful fire because it led me into learning a lot about how the brain and the heart and how the body all are like combined together in the soul and spirit. Because I'm not gonna lie to you, dude, I've ran multiple 100-mile races, 50 milers, 50Ks, competed in the Recon Challenge a few years. I love being in the mountains. I love that isolation time period. It taught me a lot, but I'm also still a strong individual for my age against the average, right? I can still do those things. So that was a big piece of the transition during that time period, selling my gym, getting into, again, as you notice, I created this distraction hypothesis or approach of using athletics, using my profession to distract me from my personal life for quite some time. But when I sold the gym, I ended up having a lot of white space on my hands. And what I didn't realize what the white space was going to do to me. I didn't know that it was going to go ahead and leave my hands to be that destructive. That was the crazy part, was that like, oh, my hands have been so busy the past 3 years or 2.5 years since I've left the military that I haven't been able to, again, the half-life of consequences after doing something, I hadn't had the ability to start focusing on those things. So I started, I believe in magic, and you guys are going to laugh, but I believe in magic. And, if you are holding something inside, you can potentially get yourself sick. That's a magic trick. It's also a magic trick to share and share these stories to allow for you not to have that in you anymore. That's how you relieve yourself. That's why conversations create changes, not just from a physiological standpoint, but from a psychological standpoint. So I was like, wow, I'm running a lot. I'm working a lot, but I also still have a fuck ton of time on my hands. Like, where's this coming from? And it had me start to dwell. And it started kind of sending me into a negative spiral for a little bit. I've multiple suicide attempts up to this point, I'm not afraid to say it. And I'll ultimately say that I was not strong enough to take my life because I wanted to live more. Or there was a higher presence watching over me that was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. And I'm not saying that happens to everybody, but you know what? Sometimes there's a specific type of energy that might not be strong enough to combat the other energy that's trying to stop you, and vice versa. There might be a very powerful energy that is breaking through whatever your energy is to stop you. And that's how I viewed it to this point, because there's something more for me to be here, right? Just as I'm sitting here having this conversation with you.
So, with that very big topic right there, for a viewer right now, are you able to break that down a little more? Like, how did you come out of that headspace and time into your entire butterfly phase? How did you, can you like step it out almost?
How did I not put the bullet in my head while I was in the cocoon? And I used the rifle instead to fucking break myself out of the cocoon, pretty much. Man, the amount of ammo that I needed to do so was unbelievable. It was like, again, in Afghanistan, or the amount of ammo I had to carry on my back just to go for a fucking 3-week mission that potentially gets extended over and over again to potentially 60 days. It's the same thing here. First, I believe everybody needs a companion, not a lover, a companion. What's that companion? A dog or a cat, something that will allow for you to connect on another emotional level that actually holds you accountable. And that's, Capone. He's still here next to me. He's been with me through I got him in 2014. He's been with me since my my child, second child, third child. Fortunately, I've seen it all. He's been here through it all. And, and realistically, he was the presence that stopped me the first time. Think about that, sitting there watching your dog stare at you as you fucking play around with a pistol. And he knows what's about to happen. He just walks over and puts his head on his head on your knee. What are you supposed to do in that moment? Like, that's powerful, right? That's why I keep saying the presence aspect. Mm-hmm. What ultimately kind of continued, like because I called the breacher charge, I call them breacher charges. Ultra endurance was one of the first breacher charges to allow for me to kind of start making my way through or building a murder hole through my cocoon because of the ability to feel. When you run for 5 or 6 hours and you've never really ran that far in your life, your mind and body end up, instead of reducing pain, it starts inflicting pain on yourself. But you start feeling in such a way that you never have in the past. You know, and when I say feeling, is that like I thought that ultra endurance was going to be a distraction activity to allow for me to mask my pain. And it wasn't, dude. It was the transparency. It was the opposite. It was the transparency activity that fucking just showcased everything.
Yeah.
And it was a scary thing. But ultimately, it was what like helped develop the creative field in my head to be like, all right, how do I get back to who I was before the military? Wait a minute. No, but the military didn't fuck me up. Well, how do I get back to like the things I did as a kid before like, I experienced a lot of, I'm not going to, the trauma or whatever you want to experience as a kid growing up to then the military to where I'm at today, because I can't keep, you know, living in this infinity cycle of negativity or destruction. I need to go ahead and develop a positive, a healthy infinity cycle that I can live and fucking coast on and enjoy no matter what. And that was a piece. What happened from there was like, all right, cool. Maybe I just need to start like get rid of my weapon. So I got rid of pistols. I don't even to this day. And it's not that I don't trust myself. My wife is just not ready to have a weapon in the house yet. Right. And is that like whatever else? I'm not afraid to say that, yeah, I don't carry a weapon in the house, but if something pops off, I know where to go pick up weapons. I know how to take one from someone if I need to, and I can protect my family as a whole. And guess what? As a recondo, you won't see me in the urban environment. You'll see me taking my kids up into the fucking heights of the mountains so I can observe and fucking set up, you know, multiple security positions to allow for me to have multiple advantage or, you know, areas of advantage that allow for me to like protect my family. I know how to live off the land. I'll teach you. We can, all those things. There's so many opportunities for that. So I was like, well, at that time period, I don't need this. This is a fucking danger for me. Like, this is not what I need. And continued chasing, dude. Started chasing the dragon or trying to chase the dark passenger, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, as I continued chasing it, I found it to become a negative impact over time, which started drawing the depression, the sadness, all the other things, because it no longer was pleasant or pleasurable for me. No longer. It became unpleasant activity. So it put me back into what? That infinity spiral of negativity again. And getting ready to have my second daughter, or my third daughter. My third daughter, dude. We were getting ready to have my third daughter. I was training for a 200-mile race. I had done all these other things. Getting ready to run a huge race, ended up getting injured. I was just full of stress, a bunch of shit going on, man. And what ended up happening, dude, was, you know, my daughter was born. Me and my wife, again, at that time period, we were just dating, boyfriend, girlfriend. Now we're thrown into the mix of how to raise a kid together. When we went from dating phase, traveling, having fun to like, past 9 months have been rough. And now we're supposed to raise a child together. Like, this is going to go completely this is going to go perfect. And you know what? It hasn't been perfect, but you know what? Like, we can sit here today and say that like we have strong conversations and we had one last night without, you know, associating our emotions and our feelings to where it's against us, when it's just, no, like, these are our feelings and we should have these conversations. Now, that also created a spiral downward to where I don't know how I was going to be able to like make it out. And at that time period, I was also starting integrating and helping other veterans. And my best friend, Matt Stiller, he also was having trouble. He had just gotten back from some, you know, I&I duty, everything else. He had gone through divorce. He was on the same deployment I was. We were all kinds of fucked up, you know. He was still moved out to California. He started having bad times. So he brought his weapons to my house and I got to watch them for him. And I knew that if I texted him to ask him for his code, because I would like, if I wanted to say, he believed that I was in a good headspace. Like, check this out. This is how crazy someone believes other people. And that's why it's like crazy when people say check in on someone. Yeah, you can check in on them, but how you actually just like get no, anybody can say what they want for you to think what it is. And, you know, I was like, man, I could text him right now and ask for this fucking code, but it's like, what would I do to myself? Like, why would I do that? What's the use? And that was a combat indicator or a red flag right away for me. And luckily, I had just gotten done talking with a group of individuals who run a nonprofit called Band of Runners, and it is a running trail camp for a week for those who have been through experiences that have caused TBIs, PTSD, or PTS, however you want to go from that, to trauma, whatever else. And it was going to go ahead and be in the middle of Texas, down the hill country at the HEB, like farm, like river area. And it was no cell phone, nothing. But if you're an ultra runner, you're put in the ultra running group. And we dropped like 70 miles in like 4 days. And then like the last day, it was like an or a death by mile run. And the time got shorter every single mile. So I'm running for 6-7 hours, dude. I'm like 13 miles into this event. And, you know, I'm listening to Torture Amara's like Beat a Dead Horse. Like, I'm just like in my head, it's 11:30 at night, dude. Texas stars are over me. Moon is full blast, dude, just shining on me like a light bulb. And I'm like playing this same song over on loop throughout this whole 6 hours, dude. Like, I was just so like, I had been so beat down and so stripped of whatever ego I had without any psychedelics, without any drugs or whatever else. And it was just this most like romantic evening with myself, to where it was like, man, this is what I get to experience. And it's weird how I went back to Texas to do it in the hill countries where it all started, you know, like it was very just like connections, boom, 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 boom. I was like, holy shit. Like, all right, cool. I come back from it. I'm like, babe, we're moving to Utah. She was like, what? I was like, we're moving to Utah. She's like, all right, cool. Let's do it. Well, my wife is very impulse like me. And if you know me personally, you know how impulsive I am. I will always say yes. I'm very hard to say no. You can ask my children, but I think that's a good thing. At the same time, though, it is something that I've learned to like set boundaries around just recently. And I have to thank you for that. You've shown a lot of that. You've respected that with me. And I'm like, man, thanks for that. Because I've never done that before. Awesome. You know, you also make an impact in the most smallest worthwhile change possible by just some of the words that you use or the way you approach it. So that has been like, you know, a huge piece of like who I am today. But going back to like the idea of, you know, running under the sun or running under the stars, the night, it's like 55 degrees out, dude. It's beautiful. Like just breaking through and doing CQB, dude, on my soul during these runs. And the reason why is like, again, I just learned this theory or system, but it's called the dual mode hypothesis. And ultimately it talks about an individual who likes to train will have positive impacts doing sessions under the lactate threshold number. And that can be whatever it is. So, you know, lactate thresholds, the burning in your legs, the heart rate's higher, it just not feels good. And then the idea of you can slowly move someone over into the above the lactate threshold where they start to be able to handle it and become a little bit more pleasurable. But if you go straight to it, you end up doing what? You end up causing negative effects and take away the positive outcomes. So this is what kind of happened here was like the first hour, it was like every 20 minutes, run a mile. Cool. I can fucking walk a mile in 15 minutes. Sweet. Heart rate's at a 110. No problem. All right, cool. The next hour. All right. Every 16 minutes, run 1 mile. Huh. All right. Now I got to start holding like a fucking 12 to a 13 if I want at least 3-minute rest. You know, yep. See, no one's telling me how to do these things. It's just me. Oh, cool. The next hour. Oh, yeah. By the way, you're going to go ahead and drop it down to every 14 minutes. Okay. So 20, 16, 14. Cool. The next hour, you're going to drop it down to 12. Cool. If you notice, my progression has just gotten faster. I didn't get dropped into the lactate threshold phase or the pain or whatever else right away. It was like this slow, seducing effect that allowed me to go ahead and get to now. Oh, by the way, you're doing every 10 minutes for the hour now. That means you're holding a 9:30 or an 8-minute mile pace if you want 2 minutes rest. But everyone knows who's into that kind of shit. The faster you run, the longer it takes to recover to continue that same output. that last hour, dude, like I ended up only making it 2 rounds into that hour. And that the last 20 minutes was the most painful, or no, it was painful. Yeah, I'm sorry. It was the most painfulest thing I had felt in a very long time, but it also was very rewarding. And it was like I literally was just finishing out the CQB on my soul and clearing out the doors that I had the breacher charge put onto, and now making entry. No one else is behind me. It's just me. But when I get back finishing this run or this mile sprint, I have 30 other individuals who are doing the same exact thing. Literally, it's like, here, take this shovel, niche your name on it, and start digging, homie. Like, that's what it ended up coming down to be.
Yeah. No, that little pipeline of pain definitely sounds like the second half of like the hero's journey just by itself.
Correct. So like continue moving on, dude. It was like, all right, came back, let's get to Utah. I had a good friend out here, Keegan, who was living out here. He was doing some really good things, learning from some individuals who do things very differently in the strength and conditioning world and are kind of like the punk hardcore kids of the strength conditioning world. And guess what I am? I'm a fucking punk hardcore kid in the world, but also in the strength conditioning world. So it was like, well, let's go fucking whatever. They introduced me to some very powerful and potent activities that allowed for me to have the ability to start breaking down other doors, because I needed stronger breacher charges. I didn't just need some simple fucking half-pound C4 charge to go on a wall that's going to break the hinges off a fucking office door right here. No, I needed something that was going to go ahead and break through a fucking steel door. Right?
Yep.
Like that's what I needed in that time period. And as it continued going, I started learning how to love myself. Right? At the same time, I started learning how to love my children in a different way. I started learning how to love the world around in a different way. I started learning how to understand this idea of being an F1 race car. Right? Like that's the cool part, was like I learned the ability to go ahead and be like, oh no, how do I stay an F1 race car for the rest of my life? Because when I go back and look at my athletic endeavors and I look at my military endeavors, all of the dudes that are like really still like hammering and getting after it have a very unique lifestyle. Right? They're very introspective, they're very calm and collective, but they're fucking dangerous dudes. Yeah. And I was like, I want to emulate that. I want to be somebody like that as I continue getting older. And that's what I strive for. But out of those things, because that fuels my ego, my dark passenger. But it's not a bad thing. I'm intentfully saying those things, meaning I've already thought about it. But on the other end, it's like, no, I give myself grace and love and empathy and compassion when I do feel suffering or the nothingness inside of me. And I now have the ability to share that with my wife when those things happen, instead of just like all consuming everybody and like ruining everyone around me. It's like, no, let me sit with this. And it happened 2 days ago. There's a lot of shit going on in my life right now. Work, projects, things going on, life. I'm fucking, the dark passenger took over me, bro, and started filling me with emptiness a couple of days ago. And like, I had to tell the wife, hey, this is nothing with you. Just let me figure it out. And I went into the pool, and guess what I did? A very similar session as I did with the running thing. I did that 60-minute effort. Right? I just posted about on social media. It was a 60-minute swim session. Every 10 minutes, repeats of 500-yard swims. That was it. But what I did was I used the pool from a low stress setting, and I could still breathe, keep my heart rate down, and I progressively got faster and it got harder. Again, being able to create a shift in my headspace. He asked me 4 years ago to do that. I wouldn't have done that. I didn't have the ability to apply that tool in there to do that. And then come back and share that with my wife and like all those other things. And she's like, oh, wow, thanks for sharing that. That's something like, again, always growing. So bringing it back full circle, as I moved out here after selling the gym in 2017, going through, my time period of running races from 2017 to 2019, to where in 2020, we're making the move out here to Salt Lake City. I integrate with, great group of individuals and friends of mine that I call to this day, and grow and continue building this. And then all of a sudden 2021 comes around, and I'm like sitting in like, I just want to be like with my family, my close group of friends, and I want to write, take photography, be creative. I just want to live this life of creativeness, right? Because I lived a life of destruction for so long that I was just like, man, get me the fuck out of here. And when the times of destruction do take over me, like just recently, I do have the tools and the skills to pull me out. And that's the beauty of all of this. That's the warrior's lifestyle. You know, I see everyone talk about studying war and doing these things, but it's like, we can study war all you fucking want. But what did you learn from that war, and how are you applying it to your life today to be that warrior, female or male, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's ultimately the idea behind it. And, you know, again, I don't want to be a studio gangster. You know, I don't. And luckily I have individuals who hold me accountable to not be a studio gangster. And bringing it full circle as, like, you know, from D214 to today, you know, like, I've done a lot of really cool things. I've also, you know, had to rid myself of some really shitty behaviors and habits, right? I've had to learn to have new relationships with external objects. I've had to learn to understand that, hey, when you love something, it is going to be painful and the most euphoric feeling in the world. And if you can accept the two, you then don't live in the past, you don't live in the future, you can live in the now. And that's powerful, dude. And that's a scary thing for a lot of people. But guess what? I just learned all of that within this past year of applying all the things that I've learned and been able to, like, take this 30,000 foot view and be able to recreate my area of operations or my new world to go ahead and help me be where I'm at today. You know, I have a writing that I'm working on right now, and the last sentence is, I'm stuffing happiness into the throat of suffering, because that's what I need to live, is literally the last sentence in this piece. And I'm not going to put it out for a while, but I don't mind. But that there is what's keeping the energy, is that last sentence. I'm like, no, like, this last sentence needs to be in here. I'm going to adjust everything else for it to fucking just boom, because I know that I can make an impact with my words and my voice and the vibrations and the emotion that I bring from communicating on a platform like this. I want to continue to do it in a word form, because that's what lasts forever.
Yep. Amen to that, brother.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Let's briefly change it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Some, besides the obvious ones, what are some things hobbies wise that makes you tick? Obviously strength and conditioning, obviously creative writing.
Painting is a big
Painting.
one. Yeah, I just got back into it this past probably 4 or 5 months. My daughter does it a lot. My 2.5-year-old does. I mean, I have a folder of fucking paintings she's done of this thick, and me doing that with her now has been amazing. It's actually something that I heard another individual that I ran a case study with for Softly. It was a guided discovery learning program for the tactical professional, and to help relieve and reduce occupational stress so that they can handle more stress going the next day. And it's funny, is like, she shared this with me and was like, yeah, I do paint by the numbers for 20-30 minutes after work now. I was like, what? I was like, I get that. I do the same thing now with my kids. Sometimes I'll just sit down and paint. All right, paint with you, sweetheart. Let's do this. You know, and we're done. It's not long. She has an attention span of a fucking toddler. So of course I'm gonna give you quick time and do this, but I get to get out of my head. It's my tactical pause. As a whole, photography, dude, I love photography. I don't share much of it as much anymore on my social media, but I still snap that shutter button, and I still get a lot of stuff. It's actually helped me view life from that photographer eye, because everyone's like, oh, hey, look, you know, and I had to take this from a lot of the photographers that I've worked with, you know, and been around, where it's like, hey, like, the camera's just the tool. What you're calibrating is yourself to the tool to allow for you to see the world in thirds. That's ultimately what photographers look for. Like, that's literally what I've taken from that, right? Understanding aperture, shutter speed, ISO, knowing that they all have their purpose to give me this clear, beautiful photo. And guess what? The better I get to see the world, the better I get to use my tool, which allows for me then to go ahead and share something. And again, I'm not the best photographer, and I don't care to be the best photographer, but I enjoy what it brings me.
It bring I love photography too. Like for me, it's the ability to capture life and gratitude.
dude, so you might like this. And I took this from an individual named Mark White. The camera allows for you to catch the uncommon moments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's it, right? I can take my camera right now, walk upstairs, and I can catch a photo of my daughter jumping around and dancing to Luke Combs. I can take a photo of my wife sitting there pumping while she's getting ready to feed my child. Again, those uncommon moments we don't ever like take photos of. We get to take those photos, and decades from now, we can look at it and be like, oh my God, I remember that phase of our life.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, look how much. Oh, do you remember when Bella was that old? Oh my gosh, she was such a cute baby. Or Arissa or Malia or Atlas, like all of those things. So yeah, dude, that's it. And the next, another big hobby, dude, I just love hanging out with my children and my wife.
Yeah.
Like that's it. Like it's a hobby for me. Like I know people will be like, wait a minute, that's a hobby? Yeah, it's a hobby. Because realistically, let's think about it. My job is not like a 9 to 5. I can come off of here when I'm here and go hang out with my family for an hour, jump back on the computer, do some work for another hour, and go back and bounce forth. So yeah, it's me learning how to use these activities to like drive and make me tick is a big one. Dude, I'm a big fan of like breathing work. I don't post about it, I don't talk about it. This is my first time talking about it, but I love like the pranayama breathing work. I will like sit there and do that, from like alternating nasal breathing to like breath holds to like breathing into the diaphragm, not the lungs. Okay, exhale from the diaphragm. Now breathe into the lungs. Now exhale. Now do both diaphragm, then lungs. Like I love having that control of my system. Like it's something fun to me. So yeah, it's a hobby, right? Playing music, not the greatest at it, but I grew up playing bass in a hardcore band in San Antonio, Texas for a band called Lone Star Drive-By at that time. And I'm glad none of our music's on. I don't think it's anymore, whatever else. I used to have a demo and I wish I could probably find it. I have a computer from that time period that could probably pull it off of. But I played bass. I loved it. I played shows. I played and I opened up for bands like, Calico Systems, 4 Year Strong. Who else? Dude, I'm throwing names out right now because those are the Upon a Burning Body. I know Danny and all those fucking dudes. I grew up with them in San Antonio, Texas, listening to them play their own music. Like Gangbang at Emily's House, like all this stuff where no one ever knew what they were. And then all of a sudden they became big. Bowie, Bane, like all those dudes, right? Sudden Death. Like I got to play with these bands, that were potentially have done things after that. And it was like really cool to kind of sit there. So I still tie to that. I love playing drums. I had a best friend who passed away at the early age of 24 due to a brain tumor. We grew up playing basketball from the age of 6, and I watched him also dissolve in his deathbed in his room that we grew up having sleepovers and playing fucking 2K2 NBA and all those other things, who just loved playing fucking drums. He played in a band and all these other things. And it's like something how I carry on his spirit is I can beatbox now because of him, right? Like these are all small little tiny habits, it's like, it's like those are fun for me, and like my wife makes fun of me because these are like the random shit I do. But yeah, man, that I love, running, lifting weights. I love jujitsu. Again, another activity I do, and I do for myself because it helps level out the serotonin and dopamine in my brain and the neurotransmitters to like kind of feed that part of like, again, that piece of my ego, the dark passenger. Yeah, man. I mean, I can go ahead and kind of like I like fucking a hobby, reading books. I fucking love reading. I love reading like fiction all the time. Like I'm reading a book right now from Alison Hoffman called The Marriage of Opposites. Fucking wild, bro. I'm like, holy hell. But dude, she uses her words like a fucking paintbrush on a canvas. And like you read it and you just get sucked in so far. You're just like, I don't want to walk away from this. I just love the power of what words can do when they're used in such a meaningful way. So dude, like, I can go and say everything. I love shooting my bow. I love hanging out with my friends. I love doing, crazy long distance endurance events with my friends inside of a gym. I've done those things before. I love having conversations with you and just talking, bro. Like, I mean, realistically, when you go and say hobbies, like, I guess you can just say, again, I've taken like my life in these hands and have just developed this like creative process to like allow for me to go ahead and do something. And if I'm not able to be creative for the day, dude, I'm not a very happy person whatsoever. Right. Like, so that's the first thing I do in the morning. I have a routine, dude. Every single morning I wake up, you know, I wake up at 5:45, 6. I'm on the computer by 6:30 writing for an hour. That's my morning. No coffee, water, just boom, as clear headed as possible. Right. Just like, boom, let's get after it. It's, again, I've just like really just learned how to like kind of implement all of these little small, little tiny activities to allow for me to mitigate and combat the negative things that have, that sometimes that consume us. Because again, when we do heal, bro, like it doesn't go away. Like it's just, you just learn to kind of like manage it. And over time, you continue to learn how to manage it.
Yeah.
So yeah, dude, I mean, answer your question. Yeah. Sorry, man. Like I can talk a
No,
lot. Appreciate it.
there's no such thing as over talking, especially between you and me and when it comes to Unsheath. And at the end of the day, all these little hobbies, I mean, they're not hobbies, they're lifestyle choices. The little nuances are what essentially makes the DNA of you. And at the same time, it assists you when the proverbial roller coaster approaches. That way you have
Right.
those things to fall back on. Do you, the big closer that I want to hit is for non fitness orientated, ignorantly speaking, um, for a viewer that is getting out of the surface, that's maybe dealing with stuff up in their headspace. What are some breacher charges that you could throw them to really take away from this opportunity to see and hear you?
Dude, that's a great question. I'm not.
It stumps everybody, but the
No, and
answer is
it's not that
always
it.
perfect.
But so that's the cool part is like I have a lot of. I do have an answer, and it's. I feel that it might be different than what a lot of people think. It's just because I wish someone would have told me this transitioning out. I guess it's such a cliche to say. I wish someone would have told me to stop drinking. That
Why?
was one of them. I wish someone would have taught me why. Because of the relationship that I had with alcohol. And it's a relationship I see that it is not a healthy one, no matter what anybody says. I wish someone would have taught me more about like the importance of like my own sleeping habits and like what sleep does for me at that time period. I wish someone would have told me like, hey, how to eat better, how to look at nutrition from a logical standpoint of energy, right? And like, this is what it does for your body. Again, that whole analogy of the F1 race car. For the F1 race car and that driver to win the Indy 500 or the championship like Max just did this past year, I wish someone would have told me, hey, man, take care of yourself from a nervous system, a psychological, and a cardiovascular standpoint. Because guess what? All those things do for you. It allows for you to live a stronger and more robust life. And lastly, I wish I would have been taught to have better coping skills when I was transitioning out. And what I mean coping skills, not ones that are just going to go ahead and mask my feelings and desensitize myself to the world around me. And I take that, idea of this desensitization from, or I probably didn't use the word right way, but these being desensitized from the idea of like, that's what we needed to do to survive and combat in the environment we were in. But realistically, we were sensitive to the tension of the environment. So ultimately we were sensitive. We just, again, weren't taught how to be sensitive going into a new environment, like the civilian world, the civilian workforce, that aspect. So like, those are some of the big things I highly advise, like would share with others transitioning out. Now it's like, hey, let's check how much you drink. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and see where your psychological state's at. Let's give you a mood assessment with you drinking.
Can
Right?
you,
Like,
sorry,
go.
for you today, I want to play devil's advocate a little bit. everything you're saying, 100% spot on, fully support. Can George drink now? Is it beneficial? Does he drink? And
Um,
if you don't, obviously, if you don't want to answer, I'm just for the
no, I
people that
told transparent, bro.
some people actually enjoy drinking if they can control that. Is it beneficial?
So that's another thing. That's a great question because I've had conversations about that with individuals. Because, you know, when everyone goes, I jumped off the wagon and now I'm going to be sober and I'm going to count my days. All of a sudden now they create this like negative headspace around like, well, if I drink now, it's a bad fucking, I fell off the wagon. When it's like, oh no, what if that time period that you stopped drinking was you took advantage of building a better relationship with yourself, and potentially when you can get into that headspace to where you can have a healthier relationship with alcohol or any other kind of substance. That could be THC, it could be nicotine, it could be sex, it could be, I can name it. Again, you need to learn how to have a healthy relationship with it. That's literally what I'm saying. So yes, do I drink today? Not like you would, like not like that. I had a glass of whiskey at my bachelor party, or a glass of bourbon.
Yeah.
Like with the J. I'm not gonna lie to you, with the fucking J. Why? Like the boys were in town, my homies that we just got back, like all those things. Like I wanted to enjoy myself. Cool. Boom. And then we had a loss in the small circle of our friend group, and a buddy of mine had to come into town or whatever else. And he was sad and everything else like that. But again, he has a healthy relationship with booze as well. And he was like, hey man, you just want to have a conversation. And sometimes that just kind of knocks the ego away.
Yeah.
And that was it. It was a very small, again, like that much. That's it.
Yeah.
But realistically, dude, I know better than to touch booze because I know what it does to me. And that is where the relationship comes into a hole of like, yeah, no. And again, it's nothing. I'm not saying it's bad to, but I think as you transition out, I truly believe that we need to slowly strip ourselves away from the things that we thought helped us feel, and actually allow ourselves to feel transitioning out to be in a clear headspace. That's ultimately the way I think about that. So yeah, like I'm not trying to come from a high horse or nothing like that. I'm just saying like, hey, maybe we just kind of detach a little bit to like kind of grow and then reattach to it and see if you can handle it to where, I'm not gonna lie to you, dude, we just got done doing a case study for Softly for this conscious warrior system that we're running. It's a guided discovery, like I talked about. Dude, 20-year-old fucking machine gunner sit there is talking about, yeah, when I go out with the boys, I don't drink as much anymore. I don't like the way I feel waking up the next day. I actually want to get out and train. I want to do something. A 20-year-old fucking machine gunner in the infantry.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a minute. You're telling me you got an operational infantryman right now talking about he doesn't want to drink that way because he wants to be able to be successful and an asset to his guys. And he goes, it's actually really funny to watch all my friends get completely shit-faced and make a fool of themselves. And I'm like, yeah, we've all been there, right? Like, but at the same time, like, at least he has that awareness now to be like, look, I enjoy alcohol because I know it's fun, but it doesn't support like my mission or my race car to like get me to where I need to. Again, it's all a relationship with everything around us. That's ultimately what I've been taught. I had a medicine woman tell me that, and she was like, it's just, you don't have a healthy relationship with external objects, which means you don't have a healthy relationship within you. And I was like, huh. She's like, how intimate really are you really? And I was like, and me for the longest time thought like being intimate was like with someone else. And she's like, break down intimacy. Into me, I see.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, again, another mini breacher charge was like, boom. And from there on, it's like, okay, now I'm aware of like, how do I utilize, coffee? How do I, talk with my wife? Do I do these things? How do I act with my kids? Am I giving myself, a healthy relationship with running in the mountains again? Am I using BJJ in a healthy manner? Because it can become a very masking, distracting type because of, you know how it goes.
Everything that we participate in, be it schoolwork, be it alcohol, be it physical fitness, they're all great things. They're all like, there's nothing wrong with drinking, but again, it's accountability, it's boundaries, it's self-love, and anything can be abused. And I know, like you mentioned, the military does not have a responsibility to prepare a service member for the next part of their life, because I don't think Google prepares you to go work for Home Depot. And it is a business.
Yeah.
And I understand that with us being so young and put into a position of extreme stress, growing up in some ways while hitting infancy in other ways, things like softly with your conditioning programs, my goals with Unsheath, BAS, PV Abate, they're all ways to teach the younger kids essentially how to move from Google to Home Depot.
Correct. And
And
not just your kids, brother, also those who've been doing the job for a very long time is
exactly.
also what I've seen working and driving this guided discovery program. We had guys that are 20, 25 years in service who have done some really fucking cool things. To sit there and say also too, yeah, like, I stopped drinking before bed and it improved my sleep. And my pain went away over time. Oh, hey, I stopped drinking, I slept better. Now I'm talking to a therapist. Again, what I'm saying is that, like, again, it's not saying you can't do it. It's just like learning to have a healthy relationship with external objects around you. But to do that, you have to have that healthy relationship within you, right? So that you can chase your goals. That's it. We can talk about the idea of like resistance and what it does to you if you meet it, and what people do most of the time when they meet resistance. It's all different language.
Mhm.
They all mean the same thing, right? So at the end of the day, dude, like, yeah, when I want to share certain things to people, it's like, look, learn to take care of yourself as a human first. That means have a healthy relationship with all the external objects in yourself. Learn to sleep really well. Learn to eat and view food from a like healthy manner. And like, it doesn't mean you can't have pizza, you can't have any of that stuff. Like, no, but just learn how to like navigate that in a better way. Start focusing on how you're like reducing residual fatigue or stress from whatever thing comes at you in life. And third, have conversations with your friends. I talked with you the other day, or was sharing something with you, because you talked about using SMART, and I don't like using SMART, and I'm going to tell you that right off the bat. I like using FAST. Why? Because it is more of an introspective, more of an actionable step where you're actually connecting with individuals or in a small group that's going to hold you accountable, right? Asking frequently asked questions, right? Acknowledging, is this going to go ahead and be something I can complete or not? So being really transparent with yourself, sharing and communicating with your community, huge, right? Like have that's not going to downplay you. That's actually going to upplay you and support you, but tell you how it is. And then being fully transparent, right? With all of that. And that is like the big piece here is like, if you can implement those three things, you're going to set yourself up for success. No matter how long you've been in whatever profession you've been in, no matter whatever identity you've been in. This goes across, because I've seen it. I've utilized the same approach with individuals who've had to beat cancer, who are trying to do other extraordinary things in the civilian world, to working with, majors in the fucking Marine Corps, bro, and like helping change how they view. Like, I was a sergeant, dude, in the Marine Corps. Like, I'm here working and helping, sharing all these things. And again, why? Because ultimately the individuals that I work with have a level of maturity. And that's the big part, is a level of maturity that they understand that they want to continue to grow just as much as I want to grow. And when we can do that together, you can see yourself really start to create that infinity cycle of positivity and creation, and not so much destruction.
Amen to that.
Amen, man.
So with that being said, right off the bat, I want to thank you, George, for coming on for the hour change that we have talked. I will include your handle in the description of this if anyone has any interest in reaching out to you for everything that we've talked about.
Yeah.
So I'm going to end the recording. Go ahead and stay on the line. Thank you for coming on, brother.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you. Thanks for your time as well. Appreciate it.